Paula Christine was just 4 years old when she had her first paranormal experience. Sharing a bed with her siblings in her grandmother's home in Brooklyn, New York, she was supposed to be sleeping as the adults in the house socialized that evening. With people moving about the house, a 4-year-old Paula is said to have woken curious. Looking up, she realized she was being watched by a figure she did not recognize. A man dressed in a trench coat and an old-fashioned top hat. Standing in the corner of the room, his face was entirely black and, aside from a pair of mean eyes, featureless. Paula described feeling scared and thus looking down and away from the figure. When she raised her head to see if he was gone, she instead found him at the end of the bed. It was then that he started screaming, shaking the bed, as all the while a 4-year-old Paula was frozen, lying paralyzed, unable to scream or call for help. With nothing else left to do, young Paula fought to close her eyes. When she next opened them, the dark top hat-wearing figure was gone. Paula Christine's experience was so traumatic that even at the age of 4, it burned itself into her memory. Not only that, it caused her to become terrified of the dark, so much so that for years afterwards, she would lie in bed every single night watching the nightlight, willing it to stay lit, fearing and indeed expecting the dark figure to come back for her. In her words, he was not of our realm and provoked such terror in her that even from a young age she knew he wasn't good. It took her many years to come to terms with her experience, only sharing what she had seen with her siblings later on. Then, when she shared her story with the internet, delivered as a compelling personal testimony, she realized the incredible, that she wasn't alone, and that the figure which she had seen, the figure that she referred to as the guy in the trench coat, was actually the Hatman. A mysterious, silhouetted, black shadow entity seen by innumerable people all across the globe. Invariably described as wearing some manner of wide-brimmed hat, this unsettling figure is widely associated with the nighttime, said to visit people in their bedrooms while they are sleeping. Most commonly, he watches. In rare cases, he attacks. Psychologists and news outlets have described the hatman phenomenon as an internet-born urban legend, some manner of side effect of modernity fueled by an unhealthy relationship with all forms of media, social and film included. And yet, history hints that the hatman's lineage may be much older, with questions as to his identity and purpose leading to places far more ancient, far more primordial, fundamental, and fear-inducing than anything we might care to dream up in the present day. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. A cursory internet search of the Hatman will unearth a treasure trove of testimony. From Fortean forums to the dedicated Hatman Project website, there are simply too many stories to count. Inevitably, some will be fake, either fictions dreamt up by those seeking to capitalize on the popularity of the phenomenon, or misidentifications of ordinary happenings. Many, however, can be said to be strikingly convincing, especially when considered as a collective. After all, the manner in which this shadow entity is described is often identical from one story to the next. Tall, dark, and thoroughly terrifying. Not only that, many story sharers remark how they did not know anything of the Hatman until they thought to share their experience, only realizing through Google searches and comment sections, much the same as Paula Christine, that what they had experienced was not unique to them. This collective dark awakening can be said to have become all the more encompassing in recent years, with the Hatman phenomenon undergoing a resurgence of interest as a consequence of people sharing their experiences via easy-to-use social media platforms, including TikTok. Such a pop culture explosion now means one can find comment sections full of users apologizing to the Hatman, the suggestion being that this entity's lore has evolved to the point where he is now an ever-present watcher, waiting to select his next victim, basing his decision on slights made via social platforms. It may even be that the Hatman has grown so as to be able to traverse the arteries of the internet itself and claim his prey that way, which is why you should consider taking advantage of my exclusive offer and getting NordVPN. And so before we explore the Hatman and all of his terror in too much detail, please allow this brief intrusion for me to thank the sponsor of this video. NordVPN is a full cybersecurity package which strives to make the internet better and safer, free from online threats, censorship, and surveillance. Their virtual private network means that with just a single click, you can cloak your digital whereabouts inside an encrypted tunnel between your device and a secure external server. In reality, this means that anyone attempting to access your information, for example by silently observing you as you use unsecured or vulnerable Wi-Fi connections in the hope of gathering your passwords and other confidential information, will see nothing but encrypted gibberish. And more than just a VPN, Nord's suite of features considers all manner of smartly sinister ways that your internet safety can be compromised. For example, their recently launched threat protection feature shields you from malware and trackers, scanning your files while you're downloading them so as to identify and, if needs be, block threats before they can harm your device. You can think of Nord as your very own personal online shield, magical protection that works silently and unseen, keeping you and your devices safe from nefarious digital trespassers. And if all of this sounds like techie nonsense, don't worry. If you're like me and tech savviness is not your strong suit, Nord is there for you, with 24/7 customer support to help you whenever you need it. Nord even has additional cybersecurity apps to help improve your online experience, such as NordPass Password Manager, an everyday companion that will keep your passwords close at hand even when you're offline, making your digital life not merely safer, but simpler too. At the moment, Nord is generously offering my viewers a great deal on a 2-year plan, plus 4 months free. Simply visit nordvpn.com/paranormal scholar. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Again, that's nordvpn.com/paranormal scholar for a great deal on a 2-year plan plus 4 months free. Thank you for listening and thus helping to support my channel. Now, on with the video. Considering the Hatman in terms of TikTok comment sections undoubtedly makes this phenomenon easy to dismiss as childish silliness. And yet, the universality of this dark and shadowy figure, even in the way that internet users merely looking to poke fun at it can all agree that it fits the mold of something spooky, can be said to make it worthy of study. In short, what makes the Hatman scary, and why do we all seem to agree that he is so? In trying to answer such questions, psychologists, including the notorious arch-skeptic Professor Chris French, have pointed to the popular supernatural slasher A Nightmare on Elm Street, and the movie's primary antagonist, Freddy Krueger. Speaking in a documentary short on the Hatman phenomenon, Professor French postulates that, when he sat and thought about it, he realized the Hatman was reminiscent of not merely the hat-wearing character of Freddy Krueger, but also one of the main inspirations for the 1984 film, that you can be attacked when you're asleep, a concept that was popularized after a series of articles published by the Los Angeles Times described the mysterious deaths of several young men. The men had, so their families claimed to the press, experienced horrific recurring nightmares before succumbing in their sleep. It is a known fact that A Nightmare on Elm Street creator Wes Craven was inspired by these news articles. Lesser known is Craven's secondary inspiration for the film franchise, a childhood encounter with an unsettling, disfigured homeless man. Described as having looked very much like Freddy Krueger, the man is said to have stared at and even followed a 12-year-old Craven, frightening him to such an extent that the experience would ultimately inform Craven's creation of the now legendary horror character. And, crucially, according to rumours put forward by several sources, the man who inspired such terror wore a hat. And so, when placed under the most minute amount of pressure, the predictably reductionist argument put forward by skeptics crumbles, leaving us with a vacuous chicken or egg scenario, whereby it is impossible to determine whether the Hatman is scary because Hatmen appear in scary films, or whether those very same Hatmen are scary precisely because they represent a scary Hatman. In Freddy Krueger's case, quite possibly a hat-wearing man from Wes Craven's childhood. From here, one, if one so chooses, can then extrapolate an entire host of conclusions about how Craven may have found his Hatman innately terrifying because he was already somehow subconsciously attuned to fear the ultimate and original Hatman, potentially due to a suppressed childhood encounter, or even because of an inherited unconscious fear that we all collectively possess. After all, Freddy Krueger's 1984 debut is hardly the first time that a Hatman has been used as a vessel for fear. The much earlier 1927 beloved silent horror film, London After Midnight, had the man in the beaver hat, who in many ways can be said to be a much better aesthetic fit for a Hatman cultural influence than Freddy Krueger. But we are departing from the central narrative. Suffice to say, hat-wearing creeps appear in media time and time again. Such does not necessarily disprove the validity of Hatman encounters. Conversely, some might even say that these hat-wearing horror icons help to substantiate them. And so, we are left once again with the question, what makes the Hatman scary? Another eyewitness to have shared their experience is Jada Ray, who in November 2021 took the time to document her testimony via a video published to YouTube. Speaking to the camera, she relayed how some years earlier, sometime in 2006 or 7, when she was aged between 7 and 9, she saw a hat-wearing shadow figure in the hallway outside of her mother's bedroom. Living in Birmingham, Alabama, she had been sharing a bed with her mother when she woke in the middle of the night. The TV was still on, and its light drew Jada's young eyes to the open bedroom door and the hallway beyond. There, illuminated in the dim light, was, so Jada has claimed, a shadowy figure wearing a hat and a trench coat. She could not see any features, merely a black figure that appeared as a shadow standing inside or on the wall. After rubbing her eyes to confirm that she was awake, Jada was left paralyzed with fear, staring across the room at the shadow entity, unable to move or scream, locked in some manner of supernatural staring contest. The Hatman did not move, did not say anything, only watched. Ultimately, Jada was able to retreat under the covers and go back to sleep. To this day, she regrets not having woken her mother so as to have her witness the sight too. Regardless, her experience was validated when, years later, she, like so many others, took to the internet to research her sighting and found many other people claiming the same. And so, her Hatman was real, proving to her that we are not the only things in this universe. Even so, Jada has been left wondering what the figure was and why it visited her. Such can be said to be the crux of her fear. Not knowing the being's purpose has left her chilled, so much so that her emotions were clear to see in the video of her telling the story. She freely admits that her eyes begin to water merely at the thought of her childhood experience and what it all means, with her concluding that she hopes, and indeed prays, never to have to relive it. Experiencers becoming visibly overwhelmed when relaying a Hatman encounter can be said to be a commonality in this phenomenon. Another is Patrick James, who claims to have suffered Hatman sightings for 3 years between the ages of 15 and 18 at his family's lake house in Missouri. Throughout his video testimony, he expresses his fear and anxiety at simply speaking about his personal experience of a large, tall shadow with a trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat in his bedroom window. Similar to others who claim to have seen the Hatman, Patrick told of his terror and confusion as to the figure's purpose, explaining how he would study it in an attempt to both debunk it as a misidentification of an ordinary shadow and to see if it would move or otherwise do something that would help to illuminate upon its purpose for being in his bedroom. Ultimately, however, it never did. It would only watch, and so, as Patrick suggests, feed off of his fear. Horrifyingly, the notion that this hat-wearing shadow being feeds off fear is not uncommon. Countless testimonies in videos, forum posts, and even within the comment sections of other testimonies describe how being scared seems to energize the Hatman. In the words of one experiencer who claimed to have encountered the figure nearly every night for years between the ages of 5 and 8, "My fear grew and the Hatman persisted." And so, for many, the nature of this being is clear. He is fear-inducing and thrives off, indeed harvests and consumes, that which he provokes. In this way, the testimony of psychic medium Corinne Wilson can be said to provide much food for thought. Appearing in a 2019 indie documentary on the Hatman titled The Hatman Documented Cases of Pure Evil, she speaks of the Hatman in terms of it being an interdimensional being that takes the hat-wearing form when it crosses into our realm so as to feed off human energy. Informed by her personal encounter with the hat-wearing entity during an ayahuasca ceremony in Hawaii, Corinne claims that the traditional psychoactive plant medicine enabled her to enter a higher state of consciousness and thus see into a different realm of existence, namely the dimension where the Hatman ordinarily resides. She describes how it was a very spooky environment to be in. Regardless, she looked around, only to discover the Hatman standing over the body of one of the other people she was attending the ceremony with. He looked physical, she explained. It was dark, but he was so much darker that he almost glowed with darkness. In her words, she was witnessing a psychic attack of dark consciousness. Undoubtedly, such a concept is chilling, most especially when one considers the wealth of testimony that exists which claims similar. In this way, it can be said to be both intriguing and terrifying to consider the writings of esotericists concerned with altered states of consciousness, similar to that described by Corinne Wilson. In particular, the projection of the astral body, published by American esotericist Sylvan J. Muldoon in 1929, describes how misalignment between the etheric and physical bodies can result in us becoming more of a magnet to the universal energy. Such an occurrence takes place, so Muldoon writes, every night for millions of people, in the borderland between the conscious and the unconscious, namely when we wake and fall asleep. More properly called hypnagogia and hypnopompia, these two states of altered consciousness are not usually something of which we are aware. We simply fall asleep or wake up. And yet, on occasion, awareness does occur. It is then that we might, for example, experience a jolt or a sensation of falling. In the worst cases, we might find ourselves locked in sleep paralysis, stuck between slumber and wakefulness, unable to move, subjected to what are known as hypnopompic hallucinations. Science cannot explain such visions, but assures us that they have a rational explanation. Writers, including Muldoon, tell us that they occur because of a misalignment. We have regained consciousness too soon before our etheric body can properly reintegrate into our physical body, thus resulting in conscious awareness of, and indeed attraction to, the astral realm. It is in this other realm that many esotericists, occultists, psychics claim otherwise unseen entities reside, amongst them the Hatman. In this way, the Hatman may more formally be referred to as a classification of shade or manes, ancient terms which relate to shadows of the dead, both the souls of deceased loved ones and also other underworld entities. In particular, Lemuras, a subset of manes, were considered to be formless and liminal, shadowy entities associated with darkness and its dread. Such a boundary being would thus be something one might expect to encounter in a hypnopompic state, as is often reported to be the case in hatman testimonies. A term which rarely appears in ancient literature, Lemuras are nonetheless referred to by the Augustan poet Ovid, with the suggestion being that even in his time these entities were regarded as ancient concepts. Given the scant references, it is not abundantly clear precisely what these entities were thought to be, with there being some overlap with spirits of the once living dead. What is interesting, however, is that they were associated with the colour black, with offerings of black beans being given in an attempt to appease them. Not only that, ancient literature suggests that one should avert their gaze from these shadow entities, the suggestion being that no good will come from locking eyes with them. Finally, it is worth noting that some historians have postulated that the Manes more generally were offered blood sacrifices via gladiatorial games originally held at funerals, again reinforcing how ancient belief was very much occupied with the idea of appeasing these unseen death shadows. And so, perhaps present-day experiencers have a right to fear the hatman. For certainly, even beyond the ancient Greeks and Romans, there are plentiful references to shadow beings, and even the need to guard one's own shadow from the dangers to be found in the dark. In China, for example, it is traditional for bystanders at a funeral to move back when the lid is about to be placed over a coffin, the fear being that should your shadow become trapped within, your health will suffer. Equally, in ancient Arabia, it was thought that a man's shadow being trod upon by certain animals would deprive him of the power of speech and motion. This is all because, for the longest time, the shadow has been thought of as a vital part of man. In short, the duplicate of our very soul. Such is why one can find stories, fictional and otherwise, of individuals selling their shadow to the devil, such as in the 1814 novella The Miraculous Story of Peter Schlemihl. One might expect to hear of one selling one's soul, but what must be realized is that for much of human history there existed no difference between the two. One's soul and one's shadow were one and the same thing. And so, what does all of this mean for the hatman? Considering his shadowy nature, might it simply be that people are encountering a hat-wearing spirit of the dead? After all, descriptions of the hatman do vary in terms of what sort of hat he is seen wearing, with some people referencing top hats, others fedoras, some cowboy hats, and even the occasional bowler. Given how many ghosts are said to wear clothing, from military uniforms to ladies in white, green, grey and black, following this line of thinking, it is not implausible to conclude that the hatman may simply be yet another attired spectre. Returning to Sylvan J. Muldoon, he speculates that it is perfectly ordinary for spirits of the dead to wear clothes, particularly those which would have been customary during life. Similarly, he suggests that the aura can even provide a covering for the astral body, with the colour of the aura defining the quality of the spirit, with darker shades, including the black associated with the hatman, denoting a low state of being. And yet, for all of this, there is a consensus amongst many hatman experiencers that what they encountered was more than just a ghost. It was something other, something darker, and very much the same entity from one case to the next. Such a belief is arguably all the stronger in those who have seen what can be said to be ordinary shadow figures. The hatman stands apart. Not merely that, some have suggested that he leads, indeed commands lesser shadow people, firmly painting him as an entity which ranks higher than a spirit of the dead. In short, many people have condemned the hatman as demonic. Here it is interesting to consider a testimony put forward by Kyle J. Macias, the filmmaker responsible for the 2019 indie documentary on the hatman. Speaking on a podcast, he spoke of an interview he conducted with someone he described as a high-ranking Santeria witch doctor. The interview did not make the final cut of the film, and yet what Macias was told stayed with him. Supposedly, the witch doctor was very familiar with the hatman, claiming to have had a contract with the dark entity, whereby he was able to send it to people so as to hex them. It was, so the witch doctor claimed, a type of demon, with its hat being symbolic of the authority which it had over other shadow entities. And so, as above, so below. Just as hats have traditionally denoted higher social status in human culture, with the crown being the ultimate hat, the same may well be true of the demonic realm. Thinking of the hatman as a demonic being has led to people claiming that his purpose is to harvest human souls on behalf of the evil one. There is even the theory that his appearance is a bloodline curse, with it not being uncommon for encounters to be hereditary. Indeed, in the testimony of Jada Ray, the lady from Alabama who claims to have seen the hatman as a child outside her mother's bedroom, she reveals that when she shared her experience with her mother, the older woman subsequently revealed that she too had seen the same hat-wearing shadow man. At this point, one can tentatively offer another explanation regarding the identity of the hatman, that he is an extraterrestrial being. For certainly, there can be said to be striking similarities between the details reported by hatman experiencers and self-described alien abductees. From nighttime appearances to the inability to resist the influence of the observing figure to the hereditary nature of encounters. It might even be argued that the hat and coat attire of the hatman is actually some manner of spacesuit or cloaking device being misinterpreted by befuddled victims. And whilst this might sound like a step too sensational for some, it is worth noting that Heidi Hollis, the author who claims to have coined the term hatman, is firmly in the extraterrestrial camp. After having several personal paranormal experiences and researching the phenomenon for many years, she vocally believes that humanity is engaged in a horrific secret war with alien beings who appear as shadow people, and specifically the hatman. Discussing her research in several podcast interviews, she reveals how she came to realize the hatman is the epitome of all things evil and the connecting factor between all paranormal phenomena. Far more than a mere shadow figure, he, so Heidi claims, has the ability to step out from beyond the shadows, to become solid and communicative, and even direct shadow people and other paranormal entities as his minions. And so, as is often the case when discussing such subject matter, the more one reads, the more the lines between different sorts of paranormal phenomena can be said to blur, until it all starts to look much like the same thing. Indeed, this is something I have discussed numerous times before, notably in my episodes on Ouija board usage in schools and the varied anomalous phenomena associated with the Bridgewater Triangle. In both cases, and I believe here also, the concept of non-human intelligences is crucial to understanding. A notion eloquently explained by author Anthony Peake in his book The Hidden Universe, such entities, which he refers to as egregorials, may manifest as any and indeed every form of supernatural being, from angels to demons to poltergeists to aliens. Such others, intelligent beings of non-human origin, are proposed to exist in another realm, becoming visible and accessible whenever we enter an altered state of consciousness. Given that so many reports of encounters with hatman take place in the midway between sleep and wakefulness, this dark shadowy entity might therefore also be considered in this way, potentially reaffirming the belief that he represents some manner of unseen, ancient malevolence. The primordial Lemures spoken of by the Greeks and Romans, the energy-sucking interdimensional being described by Corinne Wilson, and even the epitome of all things evil declared by Heidi Hollis. In short, the hatman is ever present, if not ever visible. Of course, there will always be those who argue against the convenience of a being that one cannot easily see and thus easily prove the existence of. And indeed, that encounters with the hatman predominantly occur during altered states of consciousness does mean there will always be a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to skeptics explaining him away. After all, if you were just asleep, how can you be 100% sure you weren't still dreaming? Likewise, if you had taken ceremonial shamanic plant medicine, such as the hallucinogenic ayahuasca, how can you be sure you weren't simply experiencing a vivid and yet ultimately not real hallucination? Hole poking abounds. And issues of veracity can be said to become all the more glaring when one considers how, over the past few years, a disturbing trend has appeared online revolving around the deliberate consumption, excessive use, and overdose of over-the-counter antihistamine medicine for the express purpose of hallucinating an encounter with the hatman. In short, a highly dangerous, highly stupid, highly botched version of a shamanic ceremony in which one attempts to visit the other world. Of course, most of those who have participated would have been unaware of the ceremonial ritual that they were imitating, mindlessly piggybacking their peers on social media, entirely oblivious to the consequences, both physical and spiritual, of such a performance. For indeed, I can lecture on the dangers of recreationally abusing medication, of the risk of hospitalization and even death, but I shan't, as there are others who are better placed to do so. I will, however, say this. Given all that has been said in this episode, indeed all that has been said on this channel about the paranormal, that unseen realm which we do not, cannot, and most likely will not ever fully understand, why would you want to see the hatman? Testimony teaches us he is not friendly. Popular culture, with its continual references, both overt and occult, to the hat-wearing shadow man instructs us to fear him. If he truly is ancient and omniscient, ever-present and evil, the chances are he has already seen you. So why give him another reason by waving your nescient hand in his dark, featureless face to attract his attention? After all, once it's set on you, it might never slacken. You might be stuck with the hatman for good. Thank you so much for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more of the paranormal. And if you would like to know more about the hatman, I highly recommend clicking through via the links in the description to watch the full personal testimonies I referenced in this episode. Thank you again for all the support you show my channel. Until next time.